In the dead of winter, on a lonely bridge covered in ice, a truck slows down just enough to open a door, and a tragedy begins that will change a quiet town forever. The wind howled across the frozen river, cutting through the bare trees like a knife. It was past midnight, and the world was painted in shades of gray and white. Snow fell in heavy, thick sheets, erasing the road almost as soon as it appeared. A dark pickup truck rumbled onto the old steel bridge, its engine coughing against the cold. It did not stop completely, it only slowed down. The passenger door swung open with a rusty screech. A heavy boot kicked out. A large white Great Pyrenees tumbled onto the slushy asphalt. He landed hard, his paws skidding on the black ice. He tried to scramble up, his tail wagging uncertainly, thinking perhaps this was a game or a mistake. He looked toward the open door, his dark eyes full of confusion. But the door did not close yet. The driver reached back and grabbed something else, a small, taped-up cardboard box. Without a word, the man hurled the box over the railing of the bridge. It tumbled down into the darkness below, landing with a dull thud on the frozen surface of the riverbank. The big dog let out a sharp, panicked bark. He lunged toward the railing, watching the box fall. Then, the truck door slammed shut. The engine roared, tires spinning and spitting gravel and snow as the vehicle sped away, its red taillights disappearing into the white storm. The Great Pyrenees was alone. The cold bit into his skin, but he did not chase the truck. He did not run after the people who had fed him, the people he had tried to love. Instead, he ran to the edge of the bridge. He looked down into the abyss where the box had fallen. He whined, a low, desperate sound that was swallowed by the wind. The drop was steep, a tangle of frozen vines and sharp rocks leading down to the river. The dog paced back and forth, his heart pounding against his ribs. He knew what was in that box. He knew he could not leave it. He found a spot where the railing was bent. Squeezing his massive body through, he began the slide down. The rocks cut his legs. The thorns tore at his thick white fur. He slipped and tumbled, sliding uncontrollably until he hit the bottom with a groan. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he did not stop. He limped across the ice until he reached the box. It was silent. The dog nudged it with his wet nose. He let out a soft woof. Nothing. He lay down beside it, curling his large, warm body around the cardboard to shield it from the snow. He licked the tape, trying to peel it back, but it was frozen solid. He could not open it. All he could do was stay. The snow piled up on his back, turning him into a ghost in the darkness. He shivered, his teeth chattering, but he did not move. He waited. He hoped. He prayed in the only way a dog knows how, with loyalty. Morning came slowly, a pale, sickly light struggling through the storm clouds. The snow had not stopped. It was deeper now, covering the riverbank in a blanket of white silence. A mile down the road, in a small cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, an old man named Arthur was drinking his coffee. Arthur was a retired park ranger. He knew the woods and he knew the silence of winter. But today the silence felt wrong. He put on his heavy coat, his boots, and his hat. He grabbed a walking stick and headed out to check the perimeter of his land. The snow crunched under his feet. He walked toward the bridge, checking for fallen branches or ice dams. That was when he saw it. At first he thought it was a mound of snow left by a plow. But then the mound moved. Arthur squinted. He saw a patch of white fur, then a black nose. He hurried his pace, his heart sinking. "Hello?" he called out, his voice rough from disuse. "Is someone there?" The Great Pyrenees lifted his head. He was exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red, his fur matted with ice and dried blood from the fall. When he saw Arthur, he did not wag his tail. He let out a deep, warning growl. He stood up, shaking the snow from his back, and positioned himself in front of the box. Arthur stopped. He raised his hands slowly. "Easy, boy," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog bared his teeth. He was big, easily 120 pounds, and he looked fierce. But Arthur saw the tremble in the dog's legs. He saw the fear behind the aggression. "You're protecting something, aren't you?" Arthur whispered. He took a step closer. The dog snapped, stepping forward to block Arthur's path. Arthur looked down. He saw the cardboard box behind the dog's hind legs. The box was wet and sagging, half buried in the drift. Arthur knew he had to act fast. The cold was deadly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a strip of beef jerky he kept for emergencies. He tossed it gently. The meat landed near the dog's paws. The Great Pyrenees sniffed it, his hunger warring with his duty. He took the meat quickly, swallowing it whole, but his eyes never left Arthur's face. "I can help," Arthur said, his voice calm and steady. "But you have to let me see." He took another step. The dog growled again, but this time it was softer, a plea rather than a threat. Arthur knelt down in the snow, making himself smaller. He extended a hand. The dog stretched his neck, sniffing Arthur's glove. He smelled wood smoke and kindness. Slowly, the dog stepped aside. Arthur reached for the box. The dog watched his every move, his muscles tense, ready to attack if Arthur made the wrong move. Arthur pulled a small knife from his pocket and sliced the tape. He opened the flaps. Inside, curled into a tight ball, was a small King Charles Spaniel. Her fur was brown and white, but she was shivering so violently she looked like a vibrating blur. She was barely breathing. Arthur gasped. "Oh, you poor things." He looked at the big white dog. "You kept her warm," he said, amazement in his voice. "You stayed all night." The Great Pyrenees nudged the box with his nose, whining softly. The spaniel lifted her head weakly and let out a tiny, rasping squeak. Arthur took off his heavy coat. He wrapped the spaniel in his scarf and lifted her into his arms. Then he looked at the big dog. "Come on, we have to go." But the Great Pyrenees collapsed. The adrenaline had worn off, and the pain in his injured shoulder took over. He could not walk up the steep, icy bank. Arthur cursed softly. He looked at the steep climb. He looked at the freezing river. He knew he could not carry both. "Stay here," he commanded firmly. "I will come back, I promise." He scrambled up the bank with the spaniel tucked against his chest. He ran back to his cabin, his lungs burning in the cold air. He placed the little dog by the fire, rubbed her briskly with a towel, and set out a bowl of warm broth. Then he grabbed a sled and a rope and ran back into the storm. When he returned to the riverbank, the white dog was almost covered in snow again. His eyes were closed. Arthur's heart stopped. "No, no, don't you give up on me," he shouted. He slid down the bank and shook the dog. The Great Pyrenees opened one eye. He was fading. Arthur managed to roll the heavy dog onto the sled. It took every ounce of strength the old man had. He tied the rope around his waist and began to pull. He clawed his way up the embankment, slipping, falling, getting up again. He pulled until his muscles screamed. He pulled for the dog who had refused to leave his friend. Finally, they reached the top. Arthur dragged the sled all the way to the cabin. He pulled the dog inside, onto the rug in front of the roaring fireplace. The heat hit them like a physical wave. Arthur collapsed into his armchair, gasping for breath. For 2 hours, the cabin was silent, except for the crackling of wood and the wind outside. The dogs slept. Arthur watched them. He saw the Great Pyrenees twitch in his sleep, running through dream snow. He saw the little spaniel crawl closer to the big dog, burying her face in his thick white fur. When evening came, the Great Pyrenees woke up. He tried to stand but yelped. Arthur was ready. He had warm water and food. "Eat," Arthur said gently. The dog drank the water thirstily, but he did not touch the food. Instead, he nudged the bowl toward the spaniel. Arthur smiled, a sad, weary smile. "She has her own, don't worry." Only when the little dog began to eat did the big one take a bite. Arthur named them that night. He called the big protector Ghost because he had appeared out of the white storm. He called the little one Lady. Days turned into weeks. The storm passed and the sun returned. Lady recovered quickly. She was young and resilient. She followed Arthur everywhere, her tail wagging like a metronome. But Ghost was different. His shoulder healed, but his heart was slow to mend. He spent hours staring out the window, watching the road. He would pace by the door, low growls rumbling in his chest whenever a car passed by in the distance. Arthur noticed something else. Ghost never let Lady out of his sight. If she went into the kitchen, he followed. If she went outside to do her business, he stood over her, scanning the trees for eagles or coyotes. He was not just a dog, he was a guardian. One afternoon, Arthur took them for a walk to the local general store. It was a small town and news traveled fast. People stopped to admire the dogs. "Where did you get them?" the shopkeeper asked, handing a biscuit to Lady. "Found them by the bridge," Arthur said grimly. "Someone threw them away like trash." The shopkeeper shook his head. "People are wicked, but they're lucky they found you." As they were leaving, a green sedan pulled into the parking lot. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in expensive clothes that looked out of place in the rugged mountain town. She saw Lady and stopped dead in her tracks. "That's her!" she cried out. "That's my dog!" Arthur tightened his grip on the leashes. Ghost stepped in front of Arthur, his hackles rising. The woman rushed forward, but Ghost let out a roar of a bark that made her freeze. "Control your beast!" she screamed. "That spaniel is mine. Her name is Princess. She was stolen from my yard 2 weeks ago." Arthur looked at the woman, then at Lady. "Stolen?" he asked. "Yes, I have papers. I have photos." The woman was shaking, tears in her eyes. "Please, I've been looking everywhere." Arthur's heart sank. If she was the owner, he had to give the dog back. But something felt wrong. "What about him?" Arthur pointed to Ghost. The woman looked at the Great Pyrenees with disgust. "I've never seen that monster in my life. I only have Princess." Arthur stepped back. "If you want the dog, you can come to the sheriff's office with me. We'll sort it out there." At the station, the sheriff checked the woman's photos. They matched. It was true. Lady was indeed her dog, Princess. She had been stolen from a town 50 miles away. The woman, whose name was Sylvia, cried as she hugged the little dog. "Thank you," she sobbed. "I thought she was dead." Arthur felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Ghost. The big dog was pacing nervously, whining as Sylvia held the spaniel. "What about the big guy?" the sheriff asked. "Do you know who took your dog?" "No," Sylvia said. "I just know she vanished from the garden." It was a bittersweet victory. Lady was going home. Arthur knelt down to say goodbye. "You take care, little one," he whispered. Ghost nudged Lady one last time, licking her ear. Sylvia put Lady in her car. As she drove away, Ghost let out a long, mournful howl that echoed through the town. He pulled at the leash, trying to run after the car. Arthur held him back. "I know, boy, I know. It hurts." They went back to the quiet cabin. The house felt empty without the little dog's clicking claws on the floor. Ghost refused to eat. He lay by the door, his head on his paws, staring at nothing. Arthur tried to comfort him, but the dog was inconsolable. He had failed his mission. He had lost the thing he was supposed to protect. 2 nights later, a noise woke Arthur. It was the sound of breaking glass. Ghost was barking a ferocious, thundering sound that shook the walls. Arthur grabbed his flashlight and his old baseball bat. He ran into the living room. The front door was kicked open. 2 men were standing there, wearing ski masks. One of them held a heavy stick. Ghost was holding them back, snapping and lunging, keeping them away from Arthur. "Get the dog!" one man shouted. "That's the one, the white one." Arthur realized with a jolt of horror they weren't here to rob the house. They were here for Ghost. One man swung the stick. It hit Ghost in the ribs. The dog yelped, but did not retreat. He lunged, clamping his jaws onto the man's arm. The intruder screamed. The other man pulled a knife. "Hey!" Arthur shouted, shining the flashlight in their eyes. "Get out!" He swung the bat, hitting the knife wielder in the shoulder. The man stumbled back. Ghost released the first man and turned on the second, driving him out into the snow. The men scrambled toward a dark truck parked at the bottom of the driveway, the same truck Arthur had seen tracks of on the bridge. They sped away. Arthur slammed the door and locked it. He fell to his knees beside Ghost. The dog was bleeding from a cut on his head, and he was favoring his ribs. "You foolish, brave boy," Arthur whispered, his hands trembling as he checked the wounds. "Why do they want you?" The next morning, Arthur took Ghost to the vet. The vet, Dr. Hansen, cleaned the wounds. "He's tough," Dr. Hansen said. "But Arthur, you need to see this." He held up a scanner. "I found a chip. I missed it the first time because it had migrated down his leg." The scanner beeped. A number popped up. Dr. Hansen typed it into the database. His face went pale. "This isn't a pet," Dr. Hansen said quietly. "This dog is registered to a security firm, a very shady one. They rent out guard dogs for illegal operations, warehouses, fighting rings. His name isn't Ghost, it's Titan." Arthur felt a chill. "So he escaped?" "No," Dr. Hansen said, reading the screen. "It says here he was marked as disposed of 3 weeks ago. Reason? Too soft, wouldn't attack bait animals." Arthur looked at the gentle giant lying on the table. He wouldn't hurt the little dog, Arthur realized. They wanted him to kill things, and he wouldn't do it, so they dumped him. "And the spaniel?" Dr. Hansen asked. "Probably stolen by the same people to be used as practice," Arthur said, his voice shaking with rage. "That's why he was protecting her. He saved her from them." "But why did they come back?" "Because," Arthur said, realizing the truth, "Sylvia made the news. The story of the reunited dog was in the paper yesterday. They saw the picture. They saw Ghost in the background. They know he's alive. And maybe he knows something. Or maybe they just don't want to witness." Arthur knew they were not safe. He called the sheriff. He called Sylvia. "Is Lady safe?" he asked urgently. "Yes, she's right here," Sylvia said. "Why?" "Keep her inside. Lock your doors. The men who took her, they aren't just thieves. They're dangerous." That night, Arthur did not sleep. He sat in his chair with a shotgun across his lap. Ghost lay at his feet, eyes open, watching the door. The snow began to fall again, heavy and silent. At 3 in the morning, headlights swept across the windows. Not one car, but 2. They were coming back, and this time they weren't sneaking. The sheriff had stationed a deputy at the bottom of the hill, but the radio was silent. Had they heard him? Arthur stood up. "Ghost, back room," he ordered. The dog refused. He stood in front of Arthur, a wall of white fur and muscle. Voices shouted outside, "Come out, old man! Give us the dog and nobody gets hurt!" Arthur opened the window a crack. "You're trespassing. The police are on their way." "The police are busy," a rough voice laughed. "We cut the phone line." They started to smash the windows. Arthur fired a warning shot into the air. The men hesitated, but then they rushed the porch. There were 4 of them now. Suddenly, a siren wailed. Not from the road, but from the woods behind the house. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees. It was the state police. The sheriff had called for backup hours ago, suspecting an escalation. They had been waiting in the dark. "Drop your weapons," a loudspeaker boomed. The men panicked. They tried to run, but the deep snow slowed them down. Police dogs, German shepherds and Malinois, burst from the tree line, tackling the intruders. It was chaos. Arthur watched from the window as the men were handcuffed and dragged away. When the noise died down, the sheriff knocked on the door. "It's over, Arthur. We got them. The whole ring. We found the truck full of stolen collars." Arthur opened the door. The cold air rushed in, but it felt clean this time. Ghost walked out onto the porch. He looked at the police dogs, then he looked at the captured men. He did not bark. He just watched them with a calm, regal gaze. He had won. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The men were part of a multi-state ring stealing pets and training fighting dogs. Ghost's testimony was his mere existence, a dog who refused to be cruel, even when beaten, even when abandoned. Months passed. Spring arrived, melting the snow and turning the river into a rushing torrent of blue water. The cabin was peaceful again. One warm afternoon, a familiar car pulled up. Sylvia stepped out, and jumping out behind her was Lady. The spaniel spotted Ghost instantly. She squealed with joy and raced across the grass. Ghost stood up, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Lady jumped at his face, licking his nose, his ears, his eyes. Ghost lay down, letting the little dog climb all over him. Sylvia walked up to the porch, smiling. "We couldn't stay away," she said. "Lady misses him too much. And I think I owe you both a lot." "You don't owe us anything," Arthur said, watching the dogs play. "Actually," Sylvia said, "I have a big house, a big fenced yard, and I travel a lot for work. I worry about Lady being alone." She hesitated. "I was wondering, would you and Ghost like to come over for dinner? And maybe visit more often?" Arthur looked at Ghost. The big dog was rolling in the grass, the spaniel tugging on his ear. He looked happy. He looked safe. "We'd like that," Arthur said. "We'd like that very much." Ghost stopped playing and looked at Arthur. He barked a deep, happy sound that echoed off the mountains. He had found his purpose. He wasn't just a guard dog or a fighter. He was a friend. The nightmare on the bridge was a distant memory now. The ice had melted, and in the warmth of the sun, the old man and the two dogs sat together, a strange, beautiful family forged in the cold, bound by loyalty and saved by love.